I'm Betty Allen, and I'm chairman of the Lake Ripley Cemetery Association. Tonight we have 6 stops on our tour, and we have portrayed 14 different characters from all walks of life.
And I'm Darlene Kotelnicki, and I am chairman of the Litchfield Heritage Preservation Commission, and we are very happy to do this first ever Watercade Cemetery Tour.
My name, ladies and gentlemen, is Clark L. Angel. And I said that wrong because people correct me all the time and they call it Angel. And so I don't know which one it is, and I don't have any heirs to the family to tell me. However, some of the locals say it is Angel. Right, I'm born in 1838 in upstate New York to a lovely mother. And her claim to fame is that they live in and around Lake Champlain. They see the War of 1812 when the battleships, the English and the Americans are fighting with the bombs blasting, etc. My father fights in the War of 1812, and so President Buchanan issues warrants for land in the new territories. So, in 1858, I leave upstate New York. I walk all the way to Illinois, get rides in carts, whatever I can, and I end up in Illinois, and then I finally make my way to the Mississippi, and I get on a boat, and I come north to St. Paul. Why I went a little south and a little west more than I had to, I don't know. I'm known for my wanderlust. I leave St. Paul, I take my warrants issued by President Buchanan, and I go to Rockport, Minnesota, and I use them there and start farming. I bring my wife, family, and my mother to Minnesota. Now, this is 1858, so I'm farming, and the Civil War comes along. Well, I am a little wanderlust, as I said, and so I joined the Minnesota 3rd, Company A, and I am stationed in Tennessee and in Kentucky. I can't tell you if I saw any fighting because I don't remember, and I am discharged because I'm sickly. I come back to Rockport and I start a business. I'm self-taught photographer, so I start a local business. I build a house on South Holcomb, 312 South Holcomb, and I bring my wife and family and my mother to Litchfield. I'm here for a couple of years, and I get wanderlust again. I have a partner now who's kind of running the photography business, and I go to the Dakotas, and I like the wild things. So Deadwood is wild. According to the J.R. Hall, I took photographs of Wild Bill Hickok and Calamity Jane. I can only find a picture that I took of the gravestone of Wild Bill, and he dies in 1876, so I'm not certain whereupon I took this picture. Anyway, after I do that, I take a lot of scenery out in the Dakotas, and I make stereo cards. And I sell them. I come back to Litchfield. I live a very successful life. My one claim to real fame of the Civil War is that I am one of the original founders, along with my wife, who is the founder of the auxiliary. And I take the 89 guys who fought locally By that I mean they were all soldiers in the Civil War, and they lived here locally in Litchfield or Meeker County. I live a good full life, and in 1907 I pass away of stomach problems. My wife, lovely thing that she was, she and a Mrs. McGraw in 1929 go to a J.R. Hall auxiliary meeting, and they are crossing the railroad tracks to go to our house, and Mrs. McGraw sees the train. Witnesses say everybody saw the train, and my wife is run over by the train and dies. So all my family is here in Litchfield that I know of, and as I said, I'm dead now, so I can't tell you where everybody went.
All right, let me tell you about Peter E. Larson. He was born on the 1st of March, 1846 in Sweden. He immigrated with his parents and 3 brothers. They left Sweden, went to Hamburg, Germany, took a ship to the United States, and then made their way to Chicago, into Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin, and then into Meeker County. They came here and homesteaded in Section 8 of Litchfield Township. Now, for you residents of Litchfield, that's just west of Chicken Lake, which is off in that direction about a mile out of town now. And he was 11 years old when they got here. This is 1857, 1 year before Minnesota was a state. What happened in 1862? The Dakota War. And that happened just down in Acton Township, south of Grove City, was the fuse that lit the thing off, where 4 settlers were killed by the Indians. And a lot of the settlers in this area, where the first place they headed was Forest City. Litchfield wasn't here then. And they headed up to Forest City, which was on the Crow River, and that was kind of the county seat, so to speak. And the land office was there and everything. But apparently for Peter's parents, they wanted to get further away, so they went to Clearwater, Minnesota, and they still wanted to get further. They wanted to get across the Mississippi River, so they got across and went down and went to Anoka. Now, we don't know the time frame of when all this happened, but apparently Peter and his brother Lewis came back, because we know they stayed in the homestead that winter of 1862, 1863, spring and summer. Now, why did they do that? I mean, there's still Indians roaming around. There's still raiding parties and all this going on. Well, again, 5 years immigrated from Sweden. Everything they owned was there. And you had to survive. I mean, you came, we drive these beautiful roads and we can get any place in Meeker County. But in 1862, when the Dakota War broke out, there was one road. And that road ran from Hutchinson to St. Cloud. And then if you homesteaded off of that, you maybe followed an Indian trail, a certain place, and then maybe you went off to your homestead off of there and you built your house and you homesteaded. So when this clash came, you know, they left. And he wanted to go visit his parents. We don't know exactly when it was, but he wanted to visit his parents, so he rode his horse to Clearwater, got to the ferry, and they wouldn't take him across. They said, no, we need men and horses on this side of the river, because they were expecting the Indians to come there and attack. And so he wanted to see him bad enough that he left the horse, took his belongings, tied them onto his back, and swam the Mississippi River, and then walked to Anoka to see them, and then came back at some point. We don't know exactly when the family came back to the homestead, but we know his father died in 1867. And then he took over the homestead, and through a lot of hard work and some good business sense, he grew that farm to 400 acres, which was a big farm in those days. And I looked at a plot map a little bit later on at the J.R. Hall, and the whole, like I said before, the whole, about 1/8 of the north section, the whole north end of Section 8 they own, but then they own all the land on the west side of Chicken Lake and up the northwest corner of that section. And he stayed on that farm till 1912. And he married a woman named Anna Olson on the 11th of June, 1870. They had 8 children. 2 of them died young. One is buried with the family over here. The family stone is that one right there that you see. The big 1/8 one with drop stone and the red, white, and blue ribbons there. The interesting thing about it, when you think about it, is there lies one of the original settlers in Meeker County.
This morning, on my way to town, into Darwin, I came across my neighbor, John Shields, lying in a ditch, his buggy overturned on his chest, and his faithful horse standing beside him. Now, this was a tragic event. There was no foul play, as his gold watch and pocketbook were still intact. And now let me give you a few facts about John S. Shields. John was born in Ottawa, Canada in 1830, where he was raised. In 1859, he married Miss Margaret Kennedy. The following month, he and his bride moved to Minneapolis, where he settled Margaret down, and then he left her and went to Meeker County or the Big Woods to prospect. That August, he and Margaret settled in Forest City. Now, at that time, as Abner has said, there were very few people there, 300 in the whole of Meeker County. The following year, he purchased a large tract of land in Darwin Township Farm, and there he resided until his death. Now, he was a very good neighbor. He was very active in the area. He furnished the labor towards the making of the first United States flag ever flown in Meeker County. He was appointed in 1860 to cut a road or build a road through the Big Woods to Forest City. Now, on August 17, 1862, on hearing about the Indian outbreak, he went to Forest City to investigate. Saw what was going on, heard what was going on, went back to Darwin. Anyone he met or came in contact with, he told the news and told them to get to safety. He sent his young family to Clearwater, and then he returned to Forest City, where I'm sure he helped to build the stockade and helped man it, because it says he showed much bravery and did his duty manfully. John was very active in Darwin. He served as chairman of the Darwin Town Board, assessor, town clerk, and justice of the peace. In 1886, he was elected to the state senate on the Farmers Alliance ticket, where he represented Meeker County at the 25th state legislature. He was among the most active and influential of that body. Now, on November 9th, one day after his 69th birthday, he passed away.
Today I'm portraying Abner Comstock Smith, commonly called A.C. Smith, who was a early settler here in Meeker County. I was born in Brookfield, Vermont on February 14th, 1814, and raised and educated in Vermont. In 1839, I was admitted to the bar before the United States Supreme Court, married Elizabeth Dodge, and practiced law. Also worked as a judge. And so my legal profession was going well, and then in 1858 I received the opportunity to go to Minnesota and head the land office for the United States government at Forest City. So I came on March 22nd, 1858 with my young son Henry and my wife Elizabeth to Forest City, where I opened the land office there to register land claims. Meeker County in 1858 had a very sparse population, but one of the things that helped it grow was the availability of land. And so people came by large numbers. It was not uncommon to have people camping around my office at night so they could be first in line the next day to register their land claims. And for several years things were going very well, and then came August the 17th, 1862, when in the western part of Meeker County, near a place called Acton, 4 young Indian braves, frustrated over broken promises, broken treaties, killed 5 white immigrants, launching a war that would last for 6 weeks in Minnesota and for decades more across the western prairie. People came when that attack happened to Forest City, and within a couple of days it became very apparent that we were having some very serious problems. And so I asked Jesse Branham Sr., a 60-year-old man, if he would volunteer to take a message that I had penned and bring it to Governor Alexander Ramsey. And so I wrote, His Excellency Alexander Ramsey, Governor and Company. In advance of the news from the Minnesota River, the Indians have opened on us in Meeker County. It is war. A few propose to make a stand here. Send us forthwith some good guns and ammunition to match. Yours truly, A.C. Smith. Within a few days, 75 rifles arrived to help us at Forest City in its defense. Now, all around us, people were coming in from other counties for safety. People either left Meeker County, left the area, maybe they went to Clearwater, maybe they went to St. Paul, but for those who stayed, most would come to Forest City. It was very unwise for people to stay in their homes because the Dakota would attack and kill. People were coming in with stories from the west of what had happened to them. We had news of the Groberg and the Lundberg families who were killed at Westlake, most of them. Then one day we looked out and saw a woman leading 2 oxen which were pulling a wagon coming from the west. Her name was Guri Andreessen. She told us that the 2 wounded men in the wagon had defended a cabin on what is Foot Lake near what is now Wilmer, and in the battle around the cabin they had driven the Indians off, but these 2 men, again, grievously wounded. The rest of the people in the cabin had left them expecting that they would die in the cabin. But Guri had come by and rescued them and carried them, put them in the wagon, and brought them to Forest City where she hoped there'd be safety. Well, it became obvious to us at Forest City that something had to be done more than just giving rifles to people. The Dakota, if they were to attack Forest City, would have a great advantage. And so it was determined that a fort should be built, a stockade, walls around the people to protect them. And we had about 240 people at that time. And so, on September 3rd, 1862, knowing that the Indians were near, they had been fighting on September 2nd a battle along Long Lake in western Meeker County. And so we knew that Little Crow and his braves were in the area. And so the stockade needed to be constructed. A couple of advantages we had. One, they had already cut logs to build a new church in Forest City. So the logs were already there. We just had to be able to put them up in a way that would offer protection. and we had someone who knew how to do it. He was a former veteran, 8 years of the Norwegian Army, a farmer, immigrant from Norway, Ole Halvorsen Ness, and Ole Ness was placed in charge of building the stockade. And they did it in one day. And good they did it, because the next morning, early, 4 o'clock, around 200 Dakota attacked the stockade. Now, imagine that they were very surprised. The day before, there had been nothing, and now there's a fort. And so the fighting was in long range. They knew they couldn't attack a walled structure like that. Only one person within the stockade walls was injured, and maybe a dozen Indians were killed. The war ended at the end of September in Minnesota, and then people felt free to leave the stockade, but still, it was a risky thing. Over the next 3 years, there were attacks on the prairie, and this part of Minnesota was still largely depopulated for about 3-4 years. But in 1869, things changed greatly for City and for me. A railroad came through about 6 miles to the south, and this railroad now became the new artery for transportation and communication, replacing the river that Forest City was on. And so I and many others from Forest City moved to this new settlement being founded along the railroad track, and of course that became Litchfield. And I continued to work in Litchfield, my legal business, and then in 1878 I was elected president of Litchfield. In those days, you didn't have a mayor. The leader was the president, and I was the president of Litchfield. 1879, the next year, the tragedy struck my family when my young son, 33 years old, Henry, died. I joined him the next year on September 20th, 1880, at the age of 66 years, 7 months and 6 days, where I laid to rest at this monument, which is made of zinc, not a common type of stone. Most stones are granite or marble, but this one is zinc. There was a time period in American history where zinc was used for grave monuments, and this is mine.
Tale of woe. Normally I'm Clark Gustafson, but today I am W.B. Butterfield, and this is my story. In the late winter, early spring of 1887, my family was afflicted by that dreaded disease, diphtheria. Back in those days, you could do nothing about it. There were vaccines that didn't come in until the 1920s. There was antibiotics, but they didn't come in until the sulfa drugs of World War II. So all that my darling wife Ada could do is to give water and food and love to my children. And it wasn't enough. This disease was called the strangling angel of children. The word diphtheria comes from the Greek word meaning leather, because of how it affected the nostril, the throat, and the tonsils. My darling daughter, Maud, who was 7 years old, was the first one to die, February 11th. But the darker days continued, and 2 weeks later, on February 27th, my son Jewel lived. Despite the love and the support, my wife too succumbed on April 4th, leaving only me and my baby Esther. And Esther was taken from me in May. So in the matter of 4 months, I lost my entire family. But I was not the only one. There are many here too that have died of disease. And over here is the Crosby graves. Julius Crosby, in the same spring as when I lost my family, had his 4 children and his wife die of the same disease. Only he and his son survived. He was so grief-stricken that he left Litchfield never to return. Thus ends my story. The name Ainger has French origin. The line of Angers that I am from probably came from England or Great Britain and settled in eastern Massachusetts in the late 1600s. One of the Angers, a Roland, aged 66, and his wife Mary, accompanied by 11 members of their family, moved to Minnesota. The move, 500 miles by prairie schooner, camping at night, sleeping in wagons, took 32 days to go the 500 miles. They settled in Forest City Township in Meeker County. In 1850, the population of Minnesota was 677. The Angers were some of the first settlers of Meeker County. In 1860, Meeker County's population was 928. In 1862, a son, Henderson, was born, and he married Mary Jane Crosby in 1855 and had 7 children. On August 17, 1862, 5 white people were killed, the Acton Uprising, the Acton Massacre. They were 10 miles, the massacre happened 10 miles away from Rollins Farm. His son, Henderson, was married. He sent his wife and 2 children to Willamette, Illinois. He moved to Forest City Stockade to help defend it. Henderson bought plots 4, 5, and 6 of Crosby's addition from his wife's parents. In 1878, Henderson was elected constable, that's city marshal or chief of police. He survived many elections. He also served as deputy sheriff. In the 1898 issue of the Litchfield Saturday Review, Henderson, it was said, Henderson Ainger has been appointed deputy sheriff and continues to be a terror to evildoers, as he has been in the past as chief of police. His son Quincy was born in 1858 and married Anna Wilkinson and had 1 son, Albert, who was my grandfather, with her, and remarried Elizabeth Adams after Anna passed away, and had 5 children who all settled in Litchfield area. Albert was born in 1887, my grandfather, and married a woman by the name of Sadie Agnes Bell in 1909 and had 4 children. One of those children is my father, Emerson Ainger. I found out that my grandfather, Albert Ainger, was the first person to deliver U.S. mail by something other than walking or horseback. He was, in 1908, he was on a Harley-Davidson motorcycle. They weren't sure that he was going to make it back alive or even get back at all, because the roads, of course, in 1908 are not what they are now. He got back, walked in the back door of the post office yelling, "I made it! I made it!" And I don't know if he was more surprised or the postmaster. That's all I've got.
Hello and good afternoon. I'm going to tell you a tragic event that happened almost 92 years ago to this very day. My name is Bengta Larson. I am 57 years old and the year is 1925. My husband Nelson and I immigrated from Sweden in 1888. We were both in our early 20s. We had 9 children. A baby girl died in infancy at 1 year of age. We now have 2 boys and 6 girls, and we live and farm just south of Lake Ripley. This is the Larson burial plot. In 1925, this is downtown Litchfield. You are looking south towards the railroad track. This is my daughter Nanny. She's 20 years old.
Hello, my name is Nanny Larson. I graduated Litchfield High School in 1922. I took a year off after school, and then I decided to teach for 2 years down the western part of the state.
Today is July 12th. It's 12:30 in the afternoon. It's extremely hot. Everyone has decided that it's a good place to come to the shores of Lake Ripley to cool off. 5 of my 6 daughters thought that this was a good idea as well. There was Nanny. There was my daughter Myrtle.
My name is Myrtle. I am 14 years old, and I have finally completed my 8th grade year.
There was Agnes, my 18-year-old, and Edna, my 9-year-old, who stayed on shore. There was also Bernice.
Hi. I can remember the day like it was yesterday. Myrtle, Nanny, and I were all in the water playing with a ball. Nanny and I, well, all of us actually, got a little too far out into the water, and Nanny stepped off a drop-off. I went to go save her, and so did Myrtle, but Myrtle couldn't swim very well. And I lost my breath and had to go back to shallower water. When I turned around, I realized both of them had gone under. And everyone came rushing into the water to save them. And no one could.
Now everyone on shore was hearing the cries for help. A man passing by attempted to find the two girls by himself, but he could not. He rushed to the shores of Brightwood Beach Resort. There, the firemen's picnic was in progress. There were many people there to assist. They all came rushing over. Dr. Wilmot was there. He had called for the pull motor. Myrtle was first to be found. She was underwater for 40 minutes. Nanny was next. She was underwater 10 minutes longer. Their lungs were badly filled with water. The pull motor was applied. Resuscitation efforts were attempted. Miss Bellingham, the superintendent at the hospital, was there. She assisted Dr. Wilmot. She had been visiting the McClure cottage, and she came rushing as soon as she heard. So many wonderful people were there to help, but all efforts failed. My girls could not be saved. We held the funeral Wednesday, first at home and then at the First Lutheran Church. 2 caskets were lowered into a single grave. Myrtle's Reeds lost her life in effort to save her sister. Nanny's Reeds lost her life in Lake Ripley. Myrtle's friends from school were there, and Sunday school, and they all sang so beautifully. It was so touching. And there were so many flowers and people and relatives and friends from all over the state. They came from St. Paul and Minneapolis and even Chicago. Now, thanks to James J. Hill, the railroad mogul, who brought the railroad to Litchfield, everyone was able to arrive in just 3 days. The tragic event was on Sunday. The funeral was on Wednesday. So while this event was not a joyous one, it does have a strong message for us all. Always try to be prepared, be aware of your surroundings, and try never to put anyone else in danger. Nanny couldn't swim, Myrtle couldn't swim, and they were in a dangerous situation. Now fast forward to present day, and we could perhaps relate this to texting and driving, or texting and walking. It's a dangerous situation. Try never to put yourself or others in danger. And for heaven's sakes, learn to swim. Can everyone here swim? Great. Yeah. Great. We still have a lot of beautiful days left in this community of Litchfield, a lot of days to enjoy beautiful Lake Ripley, and so please get out and enjoy it. Thank you all for coming and attending Litchfield's Watercade Cemetery Tour.
My name is Mabel Sophia Nelson. I was born on June 20th, 1889 in Meeker County. I went into nursing when the Great War started. I joined the Navy Nurse Corps. This was because the Army Nurse Corps waited and followed the government red tape, while the Navy ignored the red tape and started enlisting nurses right away. Nursing in the military was in its infancy at the time. The Navy had over 15,000 nurses by Armistice Day in 1918. They served primarily in bases, at hospitals at home and abroad. Some of these nurses served in England, Belgium, and Italy on transport trains. I was never married and worked as a nurse in the Litchfield Hospital and at Mallon's Park Sanitarium. Now, this was an actual hospital, not a sanitarium. I lived in the Minneapolis area and retired from nursing in 1953. Many things have changed in the health area. When World War I started, we call it the Great War, we used horse and buggy as an ambulance. Later in life, I moved to Washington, D.C. to be closer to my nephew. I wanted to be buried at my hometown. When I died in 1971 at age 82, my nephew, Robert Shea, respected my wishes.
Hello, my name is Mary Christine Newman. I was born in Litchfield to Charles and Ida Newman. I was born at home prematurely, and they put me in a cigar box and placed me in the oven door to keep me warm. I survived and went on to graduate from Litchfield High School in 1937, and then went on to Northwestern Hospital's School of Nursing and graduated in 1940. I served in the Army Nurse Corps and was a second lieutenant in World War II. On December 7, 1941, Pearl Harbor Day, there were 1,000 Army nurses. 6 months later, there were 12,000, and by the end of the war in September 1945, the Army Nurse Corps had grown to 59,000 nurses. We served in field hospitals, on the front lines, hospital trains, and hospital ships. I married Jerome Wilner on July 7, 1948, at a park in Minneapolis. Jerome is also a World War II veteran. He was captured by the Nazis in Italy and went to POW camp. The camp, Stalag 4, was where he spent 171 days. Jerome is a Purple Heart recipient. We, along with our son Charles Gregory, moved to Arizona in 1973. In 1985, when I was 66, I died of cancer. I wanted to be buried back in Minnesota, and my husband and son respected my wishes. Jerry is also now buried with me. I have a nephew, Jerry Anderson, and a niece, Mrs. Al Janice Westrup, who also lived in Litchfield.
My name is Frans Wallin. I was born in Malmö, Sweden in 1890. I moved to Litchfield, Minnesota, moved to America when I was 14 years old, came to Litchfield and stayed with friends and relatives in the area. And in 1917 I joined the Army. World War I was on at that time, and I served overseas. I served in the 99th Aero Squadron, and which was organized in 1917 in Texas after the 1916 failed airborne assault over Pancho Villa. The 99th was the first airborne unit to go to France, and the unit provided battlefield intelligence and reconnaissance and went deep into behind enemy lines. And I took part in the Argonne Men's Drive, which was the bloodiest battle of World War I. After the war, I returned to Litchfield, spent 2 years here, and then moved to Minneapolis. And that's where I met my sweetheart, Elizabeth Benson. We got married in 1922, and were fortunate enough to have a daughter born to us by the name of Lucille. A few years after that, I got very ill, and I was in the hospital in Minneapolis, Asbury Hospital, for about 3 weeks. And then after that, later on, I submitted to have gallbladder surgery. And when I was having the gallbladder surgery and after the after effects, I got pneumonia and died shortly after pneumonia. And after I died, my wife and daughter moved back to Litchfield. That's the end of my story.
Well, I said they told me there was going to be a cemetery tour out here in Litchfield today at Lake Ripley Cemetery. So I thought I'd knocked on my casket and I told them people I want to come out and talk to everybody. And so by golly, here I am. Well, my name is Louis A. Roberg, and I'm a 100% Norwegian, and I'm very proud of that, you know. And I was born in 1899 in western Wisconsin, and back in those days, I lived there till I was 9 years old. My parents thought, well, maybe Minnesota would be a better place to go, so they settled here at Litchfield, and they bought the farm, 140 acres out here on County Road North 34. So as I was a young boy, I went to a country school and I only got to 6th grade. My dad said, I got to come home and you got to come home and help me. So I regretted I never got my education. So that kind of got the wheels rolling in my head. Well, anyhow, as I grew up on this 140-acre farm, my parents got to a point where they couldn't be there anymore, so I bought the property. I had one sister. She was 2 years younger than me. And as I looked around, I thought, you know, I'm going to invest in more money. You know, I never got married because every time I'd be around a woman, they'd make me blush and I'd get so nervous I couldn't handle it. But you know, maybe I got all that money because I didn't have a wife. You know, it made it a lot easier for me. And so I bought up 1,400 acres of land. And when I decided to sell it, I got myself accrued $1 million. Well, I thought to myself, how am I going to do this? Well, I had other ways of investing money too. Back in the 1960 through 70, there were a lot of new teachers that came to Litchfield because they built the new senior high school. A lot of these teachers couldn't get loans for their homes from $10,000 up to $20,000 from the State Bank in Litchfield and from the Northwest Bank because they didn't have any collateral, any background. And so a couple of them came and asked me. And so I thought, I didn't get an education. These kids, these guys got their education. They're going to teach the kids how to do things that I never got. So I borrowed them the money. And then payments were anywhere from $65 up to $95 a month. And you know what? Everybody paid me back. And I got 6.5% interest, so I made some money doing that too, along with buying all this land. Well, there came a time in 1971-72 at the peanut butter milk banquet. You know, a movement started in town with this Bruce Coddington. And so I thought, well, I'm going to ride with the FFA boys down to Hartford, Alabama, and the girls. So I did, and there was an ag teacher by the name of Winton Nelson. And Winton, I bragged into him about all the money I had accrued in my time. And I said, Winton, what am I going to do? I don't have anybody to give it to. I'm not just going to pass it out to anybody. I worked hard for that. Well, he said, why don't you give scholarships to kids in ag education or in industrial arts? So he thought about that, so he went to talk to his attorney, which was Leland Olson at the time. So Leland Olson said, you know, that's a good idea, but you know, I think you should expand that a little bit. And so they made up some criteria. They called it the Louis A. Roberg Endowment Trust, and they gave it to kids that were going to go to a state college in Minnesota or the University of Minnesota. No private schools. I didn't want that at all. So my scholarships were redeemed at $500 and $1,000. So that $1 million was put in a trust. We put it in CDs, we put it in stocks and bonds, and we put it in other places where you could make some interest. Well, when it started, they were making interest around 6%, and it got up to 14, 15% in the late 80s and 90s. But now they tell me as I'm here, it's only 2% or 1%, so, but it's still working pretty good. So over the last 25, 30 years, my $1 million has given out $2 million in $500 and $1,000 scholarships to kids that graduate in Meeker County. So that is Eden Valley, that's Kimball, that's Kingston, that's Dassel, that's Hutchinson, Cosmos, Grove City, and Litchfield, to name a few. Well, anyway, I smile on my casket every time May comes around. I see all these kids getting their scholarships and stuff, and $2 million and my principal hasn't been touched yet, and that really makes me feel good. And so there's a guy by the name of Mark Wood in town here right now that he's in charge of my trust. He's the executor of that. And he goes to all these schools and passes out these in the spring to kids that are deserving of getting this, and hopefully they'll get their education and go out and make something out of themselves. So as I look back on my life, I have a gravestone out here, and it's a simple gravestone, just has my name on it, Roberg, but I didn't put the date, I didn't put a dash on there and the date I died. That cost too much money, so I tried to save that a little bit. But anyhow, I hope that people will remember me and the fact that, you know, when you look at a gravestone, you see the dash is their life, from the time they're born to the time that they die. And I think my legacy will go on for a long time, as long as that $1 million is there. And I feel very good, and I feel very proud of the fact that my parents gave me this farm, or I bought it from them, and I was able to accrue all this money. There was a story that went through town that said, hey Louie, are you going to buy all the land from your farm out there to town so that you can walk on your land all the way to Litchfield? He said, that's crazy. He said, anybody be stupid to do that? He said, I had a car, I could drive to town. So when people get done here listening to my spiel, I'm going to go back to my grave, open up my casket, get back in and take a long nap. Maybe I'll see you next year. Thank you very much for coming.
Well, we are working, trying to uncover these stones so that the family can see when they were born, when they died, and getting to raise them up after we once get them uncovered. That is our main purpose right now.
These are some of the stones that we've uncovered that were probably completely covered, and they need to be eventually raised up, and we hope to be able to do that down the road. So.
Thank you so much for watching our tour. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you for coming and supporting us.